Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Film Alchemist podcast, a show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magique. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my friend and cheerful undead corpse,
Alex Dandino.
That's right, guys. Before we start the show, a little business. We hope you enjoy spending time with our show. We enjoy having you here. If that's the case, we need to ask you a favor. Please, right now, take a second and leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show, especially if that happens to be Apple Podcast app. Quick 5-star, quick one sentence about why you dig the show.
Please.
Helps us out a lot. For those of you that have been doing it, thank you. We see you. We appreciate it. It really means the world to us. It doesn't take much time, guys, and it's just a really easy way to help us out, especially on Apple Podcast again. So thank you for that. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist, if you'd like to see the faces that make these voices and some other fun stuff we're working up for the future of our YouTube channel. You can get at us on all your social medias. We're there, too. That's a great way to get a hold of us. You can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, with your ideas for movies you'd like to hear covered, new, old, double feature themes, guest host, anything like that.
True.
As you guys know, every December, we stuff your stocking, all listener selection month. Submissions are beginning to pile up, so go ahead and get your pick in now. We will do as many as we can. Once we get the suggestions in, we rank them from our favorites down, and we'll try to do as many as we can. So get in now and bring your best selections. Yes, Alex?
I'll tell you how many we won't be doing. 31. So prepare yourself.
We are at the very end of a grueling haggard. It's so funny because tonight we're starting to end our last 4 days of October, Evil Dead. And I heard the sadness and depression on that professor's tape recording when he's like, the book of Kendar, my wife's a real undead bitch now. Life is horrible. Academia is horrible. That's kind of how I feel about podcasting. I'm like, I'm so tired of talking, having opinions,
yes,
making theories, doing horrible accents. 31 pods in 31 days has been a grueling, but super fucking fun and rewarding adventure we embarked
it's been a blast, man.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, well, hey, we've still got 4 more to go, so don't get cocky. Don't ever tell me the odds, as Han Solo once said. So tonight, guys, we are beginning our final series of the month, Evil Dead. Evil Dead to me is one of those seminal moments. I think it is for a lot of people. I remember finding Evil Dead in high school, and it was a game changer for me, right? What I expected out of horror movies, what I wanted out of my horror movies, the style and the vibe, the energy of the film are what were remarkable to me, right? It felt kind of punk rock, down and dirty. I think what I like about it more now that I'm older and have seen it so many more times, tonight watching it to break down, it is so much more bare bones than I had even remembered. For how much this movie accomplishes, there's a lot of times where the camera's just on sticks, right? Just really stationary shots. Way more, because I always equate Evil Dead with floating, flying cameras and Dutch angles and wild madness. They really had to take their shots, and they took a lot of them. I think I'm impressed with what this movie achieves, as kind of an independent horror masterpiece. What, Alex, is your initial take on Evil Dead?
I think I saw I saw this movie after I saw Army of Darkness, which is weird because
it's like you needed a palate cleanser from that documentary.
I know, right? I saw Army of Darkness first, and I had obviously they give you the preamble, which is telling you the story of Ash and all that stuff. But I was like, well, I got to go back and watch these other movies now. So I went back and watched the first one. And again, it's weird because Army of Darkness is so produced, and we'll get to that movie and all that stuff. But watching this movie, I had almost the exact same vibe you did, which it is just this sort of punk rock horror movie, man. You just see this movie's made for I think $350,000 to $400,000, and you just see you see the love. And I think that's the thing we always talk about when we talk about these independent movies that haven't had like big studio budgets or anything like that, is like you see the love in them. That's the thing that you kind of gravitate towards, and that's the thing that I really enjoy more than anything about this movie is
Right.
I see how much Sam Raimi loves making this movie, and I fucking love watching it. But I agree, like, this other thing that happened this time, and I texted you earlier this week while I was watching the movie, and I was like, hey, is it just me, or is this like teetering on the edge of being terrible but never goes that way? Like that first, the thing that I found most shocking, and I didn't remember it very well, was the very beginning of this movie. Like, they're all driving up and all that stuff. And again, the floating camera you're talking about, which is now like a Sam Raimi signature, which is weird, is super prevalent still to me. But I agree, like the locked off stuff and sort of the things that are Evil Deadish, so to speak, are I feel like we remember them much more fluidly than they really are. Like,
right. Well, this is also the hard
that we
experiment
remember.
of this is Evil Dead 2 is somewhat a polished retake of this movie.
Totally.
And so I think for a lot of us, it's so hard to separate the two at times. Right? I mean, my argument was always that I kind of prefer the tone of this one that's actually more of a horror film. Whereas Evil Dead 2 just really opens up the chocolate factory for Raimi. And there's a lot more kind of Looney Tunes, Charlie Chaplin bits. And don't get me wrong, it's a fucking fantastic. I love the Evil Dead movie. But for me, I was just tonally, it's kind of my Aliens versus Alien argument. I like Alien a little more because it's more the tone that I like. Right? It's more horror than action. I think the wild thing about this movie, too, is that it's easy to forget that this movie came out in 1981, because even watching it now, it feels very contemporary to me, right? In style.
Interesting.
So you listen to movies that are coming out in this year, right? In 1981, you got Halloween 2, The Howling, My Bloody Valentine, Scanners, American Werewolf, Friday the 13th Part 2, The Prowler, things like that, right? This movie feels so much different than what's happening in 1981 to me, right?
I agree. It's funny you bring this up.
Yeah.
Because I was actually watching that Shudder documentary, In Search of Darkness. And I thought the exact same thing, because I literally just watched it. Mm-hmm. And I thought the exact same thing watching this movie. Is like, this is so different than any other movie that probably was coming out between like 79 and 81. Because we were like just hitting the slasher stride, really. Mm-hmm. And so this is completely different. It's fascinating that this movie hit the way it hit. And I wonder why, because it's so popular, and its popularity only grew after it became what it became.
I mean, in my estimation, this is the movie that gave us a lot of that cabin in the wood genre. There are other great cabin in a wood movies before and around the time of Evil Dead, but I feel like this is the one where all of young people who watched it were like, all we need is a camera and some woods. And this is the movie we wanted to make, right? And I think very much like you saw this with Edgar Wright and Shaun of the Dead, I think this was that perfect blend of a filmmaker who loved this stuff, and because he loved it so much, was able to really milk scene for scene, right? Like a scene that leaps off the screen to me right away as an interesting and different scene is when Ash is playing the eye game with his girlfriend, right? And they have the little necklace.
Yeah.
Probably a pretty mundane scene, right? If this is a Friday the 13th movie, that's a guy who's like, I got you this necklace, babe. And then they kiss and, start bugs in and get murdered, right? This adds that extra kind of operatic music, and they're really playing some style games with the eyes. And it's that milking every scene for any bit of style and coolness. Because to me, I also was introduced to this series through Army of Darkness, not seeing it. But I remember as a kid at Thanksgiving, we would always go to one of my relatives' house, and she had older kids, right? I was a young boy, and he was a teenager, right? My mom's cousin. And I'd walk upstairs and try to peek into his room to see what was cool. Well, one year I walked in, he had this giant Army of Darkness poster above his bed. And it's just this guy, right? This handsome man with like a fucking chainsaw hand, and there's demons and swords, and the lady's kind of like curled up on his leg like a Frazetta cover. And I just
Yeah.
remember being like, oh, like I couldn't breathe. I was like, that is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. And I became obsessed with it. I have to be a part of this awesome fucking thing, right? And so I went and found, Evil Dead, and that's how I came to this. And so that's what I noticed in this one, right? Is that there is this love letter mentality in this where they never miss a chance to get something cool or fun. And the movie does this where it almost plays, now that I'm older, is just this series of vignettes over and over again, right? There
Totally.
isn't as much of a narrative through line as just this one man continuing to face various horrors, right? So almost as a filmmaker just taking a shot, like, I like all of these things about horror, so I'll do a blood and guts scene, I'll do a claymation scene, I'll do a demon scene. And that becomes really fun because now you feel like the rules don't apply anymore, right? So like the free-flying camera, we're just kind of loose and on the edge of our seat. You don't feel like you're as anchored in, whereas when I watch a Halloween movie, my feet are firmly on the ground. I pretty much know 98% of what I can expect.
Right. No, I agree. I think that's the really wonderful and splendid thing about the talent of Sam Raimi, is that he does not allow you to ever put your feet on the ground. And again, this movie, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness, all, like, Army of Darkness maybe a little less, mainly because it is much more studio, but at the same time, it still has the same vibe as Evil Dead, which is, again, like, you never know what's really going to happen. Like, you get the sense that no one's going to, like, from the jump, like, for me, nothing about it seems safe. And I think that's the thing I like the most about the first Evil Dead movie, is that at no point in the movie do I think everyone's going to leave the cabin. I assume when they go to the cabin, and I remember watching it the first time, I'm like, they're all going to die. I don't understand why this even matters. Like, this is a dumb I remember thinking to myself, this is a dumb movie because I know they're all going to fucking die. But
young, cynical Alex. I'm so fucking smeared.
But, like, I mean, it starts with this, again, the driving down the road, and he's not paying attention, and almost swerves off, and then they go on this bridge. It's like, hey, there's a weight limit to this bridge, and they almost all die going on the bridge. And there's that great, it's such a, like, great, like, oh, we need this shot in a movie like this, which is when Ash opens the car door to see, like, to look down into the ravine. Like, it's one of those scenes in a movie where I'm like, you don't need that shot. But because it's Bruce Campbell, and because it's his face, you have to have that shot because Bruce Campbell's face is that expressive. So you just get that shot anyways.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This movie's actually somewhat full of film school experiments.
Totally.
But really milked to their maximum effect, right? The scene when they first arrive at the cabin. They're just at a cabin. They add an ominous nature to the scene by boom, boom, boom.
Right.
The porch swing is hitting the door, right? We've already seen the Phantom Cam, which the Phantom Cam opening to me is where this movie separates. Because now we're flying. There's an ominous presence following us everywhere, right? In the car, he's like, jerk the fucking wheel out of my hand, blah, blah, blah. All this, right? Yep. So when we get, that cabin plays essentially as the same scene in King Kong, right? Is boom, 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 summoning King Kong to Fay Ray. And it's literally just them showing up at an Airbnb in today's terms for the kids, right? You know, like a 1-star Airbnb. They show up, but that's what I mean. Boom, boom, boom. It reminds me of being in film school and, like, watch how Hitchcock uses this device, right? And, like, watching the scene. And then you're like, I can use that. And you would go out and make a short film and immediately use that technique and be like, aha, I am Hitchcock. And so, but what he does, right? Boom, boom, boom. And as they get to the front door to unlock it, the swing stops. So simple, but so wildly effective at setting up this dangerous, unnatural tone. Because the movie does this a couple times where it uses that metronome effect of a sound, a clock, right? This and that. And then it stops or inverts, and we get this, we're like in dread because we know the camera's fucking flying around and any fucking thing can happen. And that is the cool thing is that, again, it's young, inexperienced filmmakers just fucking going for it.
Yeah.
But I think these moments, these small moments, show you that they really did understand what they were doing, right? Because I was watching it and I was with you. There's a world where this movie doesn't quite deliver on the effects or the voices of the zombies, the gore. This movie could have gone really wrong. And you just
totally.
see all these people disappear. But there is a magic in how they really find a way in every scene, no matter how bad the lighting is or these things that, you know, people get caught up on here and there. They just find a way to always make it as fun and cool as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the name of the game for a movie that costs this much to make is what you're watching is a guy who's at the very beginning of his career using all the capabilities he has as a filmmaker. All of his powers are at his disposal with such little money that he has to make everything work. And I think that's the thing that makes The Evil Dead so great is that when you get to watch a movie like this, you see the pieces that all fall into place. And yes, you're right. Everything could go horribly wrong. And based on the experience many actors had and many of the crew members had, a lot of things did go horribly wrong. But
well, there is that rumor that Raimi himself went back in the woods after filming and burnt that fucking cabin down because he thought it was like a place of evil.
But that's exactly what, like, that's the thing that I love the most about this movie is it does such a good job, and I do think it has a lot to do with the camera work, is the movie does such a good job of not giving you, man, you put it so well at the very beginning, like not giving you any stable ground to stand on. Like it's not just the fluid cam, like the steady cam stuff that goes over the swamp in the very beginning. It's also like the really fast, like the whip pans, the quick stuff, the Dutch angles, like nothing feels correct throughout the movie. And especially,
right, well, they start you at that start when the Ford truck's coming. You get a Dutch angle right away, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
You know, something like around this era, like, oh, God, what's that? The Others, right? Or, no, The Changeling, right? The George C. Scott. That has a car crash. That's where you pull back and get the wide, like, it's coming. But Raimi takes you right in underneath.
Right.
So it looks monstrous. I think what's weird, though, because you bring this up, the whip pans and the Dutch angles, there is a sequence, right? Like where Ash is having his assault on reality scene, right? The camera does that awesome, like, up and over. We push in really close on that beautiful Bruce Campbell palette, right? That face. This is where we get the clock spinning. Goo, 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 goo. You know, all these weird angles. That kind of is limited to that scene, right? A scene that struck me in its stillness was when he takes his girlfriend out to bury her for the first time, right? Mm-hmm. She wakes up. He has to bash her with a log, then get the shovel, smack her in the face a bunch with that. Then as he's on his back and she leaps, cuts her head off. Her head is cackling as the blood is splooging all over his face from the neck wound, and the body's kind of climbing / humping his leg. Almost every single shot in that sequence is a tripod shot. It's a very set, stagnant shot, just with wild, chaotic action happening. And again, this is one of those hard, low-budget indie filmmaking things. Got to make sure you get it. Maybe it's this and that. You don't have enough crew, whatever. What I think is so cool is because he takes his wild shots stylistically in other moments, your mind does the work of making that sequence seem more feverish than it truly is. That's something that really leapt out at me today.
I think that's really something that's the kind of thing that this movie does so well, is the things that should be the things that conventionally would be shot wildly, like that kind of stuff. Like literally any kind of action in the frame, I would say. Like I would go like Cheryl's possession scene, which is, my opinion, is not shot that particularly crazy, but she herself, like, he's giving the actors and the scene and the effects and everything its room to do its job, so that the things that aren't interesting and or wouldn't appear interesting regularly are that much more heightened in reality. And I think that's what makes this movie even more terrifying, is that we are spending the entire 85 minutes of this movie curious what is real and what is not. And I think that's the thing that I like the most. And that's the reason you gravitate towards Ash, because not just because he ends up being the only one to survive, but like also Ash is the only one who and this is the first time I really noticed this in the movie. Ash to me is the only one who I feel like is actually like, all right, we fucked up. So we got to fix this. Like, or not even fix it, but he's like, we got to take care of something. Like the wherewithal to go out and bury your girlfriend, that takes like, I don't know. Like if you're traumatized, I'm not sure you'd have the capabilities to do that. But I love that Ash Williams from the first jump in this movie is like, well, we got to do something. So I'm going to go bury her because that's the right thing to do. I personally would not have that mental capacity at all. At all.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the funny things, but again, this gets back to Raimi knowing when to take a shot. You said it best, right? I know I've got a pencil being wiggled in an ankle, and that's going to make people squirm. The audience's head and eyes will be moving so the camera can be still, right? Whereas when Ash is giving her that necklace, let's do the cutie game with the eyes. Use style there. When Ash is alone in the living room, that's when we'll get wild with our style. It almost is bringing us uncomfortably close and intimate with Ash, right?
Oh, yeah.
Again, it's adding something in those in-between scenes, knowing that the gore will handle itself. But there is this just rushing us into him. We're constantly running to his face. It makes you feel as a viewer like whenever something bad happens, we're running to Ash's arms, right? Like he'll wrap his arms around us and it'll be fine. It's really fun. What I found really cool about this one, too, is going back, because Ash has become an iconic character now, right? Our final boy, who has become this, he got a TV show. At one point, he was going to fight Freddy and Jason. He was going to fight Pinhead. Ash became such a beloved institution. Chainsaw Handman, whatever, Army of Darkness poster, which just blew all of our little minds. It was funny to go back, and when this shit first started popping off, he couldn't move. He was stunned and horrified. And not funny, laughing at his own joke guy, who may or may not be related to Sean Penn and his brother. He's the one who had to grab the axe and handle. You know what I mean? So it's wild to go back and see Ash's, oh, fuck, I'm just a good guy, I just wanted to buy a necklace and be sweet, to where we think of him now, which is just this, he is a never-tiring fighter of the undead and all that is evil. Right. It was really cool to go back, and there's a universe where you're like, maybe he wasn't supposed to be the guy, and then they got there and started filming, and they're like, oh, he's the guy. We got to use him.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's completely plausible. Because also, I mean, they give him, he has a majority of the dialogue. He's also the one, it's interesting too, because on this viewing, I noticed how much I absolutely hated Scott. Like, more than anything, hated that guy. Like, I was like, I've never really paid attention. Because, like, probably the first time I watched, I was like, I remember watching this the first time being like, wow, Bruce Campbell, very toned down in this movie. And obviously, you know, that was after I had seen Army of Darkness. But watching this movie again, I was like, God, I just want Scott to die so badly and not come back, just be done. Like, that's like the crazy thing about this movie.
Well,
is
it's weird because I was like, I don't. It's weird because this movie has so many things that I think shouldn't work and shockingly do.
Totally.
Because characters that I don't relate to at all, nor do I care about them living or dying, shouldn't work, right? It shouldn't matter to me what happens, and then I should be less connected as an audience member and less engaged in the outcome, right? In a way, them all being these kind of hollow stereotypes makes them perfect vessels for possession. So it's almost as if they're just waiting to be filled up by something else.
I mean, I'll tell you this, and this is going to be a controversial opinion. There's absolutely no way that demonically possessed trees should be able to rape a girl in a movie and us all be like, whoa, crazy. We should all have been like, that is fucking stupid as hell. But it is so captivating within the context of the movie that you can't you can't not be not. It's not even a matter of like being disgusted or being terrified or anything like that. Like you are just so engrossed in the fact that this is happening, and you've never seen something like that before. And not only that, it happens in a movie of this quality and of this budget. This is that to me is like the great part about low budget indies is you make do with what you have, and you're like, all right, I'm in the woods, so what do I do? How do I do things that aren't just typical possession?
Yeah. Well,
That's
that
a
was
mind
like
blower.
one of the scenes, because this was, I told, me and my friends had that classic group of teens that liked horror movies where it's like you find one and you're like, holy fuck, I can't wait to show this to the guys. Like, they'll never believe it.
Right.
The tree scene is definitely one of those scenes where I remember is so uncomfortable and horrifying to me. The strange thing, I pinned a date, like why it really horrified me, right? It's one of the only times I've ever seen, because there are a lot of movies that show sexual assault and this and that, and you see this depraved monster on the other side trying to, force down a girl or something.
Right.
The using of the trees and vine is so additionally horrifying. And when the vine pulled her shirt open and exposed her, it's like, why? You don't have eyeballs. You're a tree.
Yeah, why?
So it's like there's this extra.
Degrade.
Yeah, and that's why, because there's no sweaty, horrifying monster, right? There's no evil guy on the other side. You're like, oh, it's a power game. He's getting gratification. I understand his damage, why he's a broken being. When it's just the trees, it's just something that happens because there's no rhyme or reason to it, and it just it makes you so afraid of the whole environment, right? Like that. I don't know. There was something about the facelessness of the trees that just It's still a horrifying scene to me every time I watch it. It's cringy.
Oh yeah, it's totally cringy, and I think that's the thing that's most impressive about it is at no point in my personal history should I have been like, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like, I should have turned the movie off and been like, I'm never fucking watching that movie again. But like, you're captivated because specifically the facelessness of the horror at hand. And then you get even further into that, and yes, there is no big monster or anything like that. Like, we are the monsters. Like, it could happen to any one of us. Like, what's fascinating to me is like the title of The Evil Dead is wonderful because it tells you the things you need to know, but it is also kind of misleading because the evil dead are the ones that are evil, but we are the ones who cause we're the ones who cause it. And I think
the evil living,
when you're faced with someone who is your lover, is your friend, is your person, anybody, that you have to not only extricate like that part of their personality, but realize that they're trying to actually kill you. Like, that to me is an exceptional mind blower for this movie because that means the horror is home. It's not necessarily an exterior force altogether. You can't see this force come after you. Like when Cheryl's hand is possessed while she's drawing. Like, you can't see that come into your room. You just feel it when it's there. It's too late.
That's the other thing is she gets invaded twice. Yes. Right? Like, there's her being taken over twice is something weird is going on. Like, maybe they're exploiting the loneliness, right? She's kind of the fifth wheel in this. But it's just, that's what I mean. It's just this extra layer of creepiness. And one of the things, the phantom camera and the trees and the hand making her draw the book, all of these things are illustrating, again, that, because it's one of those things I think that I always space out on. I'm like, yeah, of course, they played the ritual, right? They found a book of skin and blood drawings and a knife and a tape recorder, and they just played that shit like idiots. And when she said stop because she's already felt it's evil, they kept playing it. Of course, that's when it started. There are at least 3 moments before that, 3 or 4 moments, right? We see, the damn thing jerked out, the wheel jerked out of my hand. She starts being possessed and drawing the book. The cellar door explodes open. So what we can tell is that this is already here. The environment is already tainted with evil. And then that is, again, manifested by the trees. And then when she says they won't let us go, that has a really sadistic double meaning to what she just experienced. And by the time you see that bridge all curled up, it feels like we're no longer in a reality that we could contemplate anymore. And based on what we've just seen, any fucking thing could happen for the rest of this movie.
Exactly. I think that the uncertainty is what makes the Evil Dead that much more terrifying. And that's what makes the movie work despite any limitations it might have. It's the uncertainty of being alone in the woods in Tennessee and having no fucking idea what the attacker looks like. Like, when we talk about Halloween, when we talk about Friday the 13th, and even Freddy Krueger for that matter, there's still, the Shape. I mean, he still has a name. Even though we don't know it's Michael Myers, he's still the Shape. We know where he comes from. We know how he arrives. We know how he gets around. Freddy Krueger's the same way. Jason Voorhees the same way. The demonic spirits of the Evil Dead they're listless. They're ethereal. It's impossible to prevent them. All you can do is hope that you are strong enough to hold them off, which, we get into in the second one and the third one. But that, to me, is what makes this movie exceptionally terrifying more than any other of the series and more than any other than we might have watched this month, besides maybe the first Candyman. But, not being able to see and not being able to harness what's going to happen to you is the truly terrifying thing about that, I think.
Right. Well, I mean, the professor says it, right? Like, it may lay dormant, but it's never gone or dead, right? So you can just show up and you're already fucked, right? There are so many things about this movie that always haunted me, right? The one most is Ash's girlfriend. I think her name's Cheryl, right? Is that Cheryl's character? I'm really bad with character names.
Yes.
But
Linda's the girlfriend.
Right? So he comes back in, right? They've dragged the body out to the woods, him and his buddy. They come back in, and Ash walks past camera, and all of a sudden, Linda's sitting there cross-legged, and that fucking smile, she's like a demented China doll. Her smile giggle absolutely rented space, just owned property in my nightmares.
Oh, yeah.
For a long time after seeing that.
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah, because the other zombie in the basement
there.
just...
that's one of those...
You're like, all right, that's an evil thing. That's it. Her laughing and giggling and just kind of the way they play in Torment. There's even the scene when she stabs Ash with the bone knife and just, licks the blood, oh, man. She is, to me, of everything in the movie, she's the one that scared me the most, right? The tree scene always makes my skin crawl and makes me feel like something's about to grab me. But she is the truly scariest thing in the film to me.
Right. I mean, I think any movie, especially horror movies, only horror movies, I don't want to say in any movie, but only horror movies have the exception of when you change the tone. Like when you change the tone of the evil in the movie to the point where they're laughing or having anything other than malevolent thoughts towards you. That truly is the terror. That to me is always the scary part. And I agree, it's Cheryl, right? Cheryl's locked on a casino now. Now I'm remembering the names of these people, and I have absolutely
I mean, that's the funny. I've seen this movie probably 30 to 40 times. None of the character names matter except for Ash.
This first time is the only time I've actually noted the character names. So now, Cheryl's the sister, Linda's the girlfriend, Scott is the other friend, and I have no idea who his girlfriend's name is. Yeah. But that is. But that to me is the scarier part. Is her literally peeking up from that's fucking terrifying and always will be rented space in my brain. But when you have that switch of it's not just demonic evil, it's playful evil. Holy shit, man. There's never going to be a time where that does not terrify me on multiple levels.
Well, yeah, because why it works is we all understand on a genetic human level, right? It's why we made weapons. It's why we wanted fire, right? That's why we stayed in a community. We all understand that feeling of, here I am. What's that in the tree line? Oh, God, that's teeth. It wants to eat me to survive, right? On a genetic level, all of our sphincters tighten as soon as we imagine becoming prey, right? We get that. Right. That is how Jason and Michael and a lot of these movies operate, right? Serial killer movies. Mm-hmm. There is something different that hits not on like that kind of genetic mammal level, but on that elevated psychological level of, oh, I'm just here to play with food. Like, I'm eternal. I control this bowl of cloud that keeps filling with, clouds. I'm in control of that stuff, right? The cartoon lightning, that's me. I got nothing but time, man. Let's play. You want to hit me with a shovel? Cool. I'll get back up and laugh in your face. The playing with your food aspect, to me, is always the most horrifying thing in films, right? Like, even something like I hear people always mention, right? My wife, a lot of people always say, The Strangers, right? The 2008 Liv Tyler movie. That is one of the scariest movies they've ever seen. And they always say it's scary to me because it could happen, right? The famous line, why us? You answered the door. You were home. I think what they're missing is that what is so scary about that film is not just you were home and we came in and had at you, but those strangers are just playing with them, right? There is no impetus. The amount of time they have to spend, which room are they in? Where are they at? They're not trying to pound down the door. That's never as scary as silence, not knowing where they are. Oh, fuck, now we're playing cat and mouse. And Evil Dead does a fantastic job of that. There's constantly like, oh, I think it's good. Ah! And someone fucking, jumps out. It's horrifying, man. That'll always work.
I mean, that goes back to the lack of safety you feel as a viewer in the movie. And I think it's always going to be the thing that makes the Evil Dead trilogy that much more terrifying, is that there is no safety. Even in the one that's the most studio, the most played out, there is still something so horrendously weird about it that you can't anticipate it. And again, because this evil is ethereal and can enter you any way, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to touch you. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It literally can just be a fog, a mist. It can be unseeable. That is the true terror, is like literally anybody can turn around at any moment and all of a sudden be possessed. That's the thing I love the most about these movies, is like, I might know what it means. I might know the visual cue. Like, anytime you see the back of somebody's head and they're talking they're talking to themselves, or they're saying something kind of, saying something kind of jinky away from the camera, you're like, it's going to happen right now. And every time it gets me. It doesn't matter when it happens. Every time I'm just like, oh, there it is. Because it's just, that's the kind of fucking movie it is. That's the kind of movie it is, because it plays with your expectations in that you don't know what to expect.
But also, another thing it does too is, again, this gets back to Sam Raimi as an absolute fan of this stuff, like the love of this film. And again, I think that's why punk rock is a admittedly inferior version of music, right? It is essentially people strangling music to death for their own benefit, right? Like, punk rock musicians are the tree, and music is the hapless victim in the woods, right? That's what punk rock is by its own admission. What it is passion, right? The old punk rock quote is, I have so much I want to say, and I won't let lack of talent stop that or quiet my voice. That's great, man. The love of this is what I think is cool, because not only is it just, oh, I know the cue of what's happening, but you get a sense when you're watching this movie that when they turn around, you know it's going to be bad, but you don't know how, right? So you get your ankle stab, you get there's so many, like, a scene that is just like the pure power move, right? Is when Scott is fighting his girlfriend, and he takes a hack at her hand, right? With his Rambo knife, I guess he had on his belt loop, right? And if he lived old enough, that would eventually become the pager and then the flip phone holster. Like, that's how that guy grew up. He takes a hack at her hand, and she kind of, looks, and then proceeds to chew her own fucking hand off. Because all of us, we see the knife. We're like, he's going to cut her hand off. I don't think anyone watching that for the first time expected the possessed to then say, oh, I'll eat my own hand off. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just like, what the fuck? And those moments are just so fucking cool, man. This movie has, what's your favorite effect in the film? Do you have like a favorite a favorite moment of horror in the film. Not even horror, but like effects work. That was really cool.
I mean, for me, it's the trees. Like, that is the most terrifying thing ever.
True.
Like, it's just, and like, to be honest with you, it's a great, you put it so well at the very beginning. Like, this, it could have gone wrong a million different ways. Like, you could see exposed wire. You could see anything. You could see someone's hand, like, going through, like, even like an E.T. There's a scene when the kids are riding down the hill, and you see the kid, fucking the kid beef it on his bike.
Yeah.
Like, clearly that was a bad take, and he's still, this doesn't even have that. Like,
between cuts, E.T. were elevated his ass back up. It's fine. We all know it's movie magic.
Right. But like, this is that kind of thing where such care was taken to making sure, and like, there might have been scenes where you did see it, but like, such care was taken to making this seem, for lack of a better word, natural, even though it's completely unnatural.
Yeah, I was going to say, I okay.
I don't know how else to put it, to be honest with you, but like, it is horrifying because it's nature. It's a symbol. It's nature. It's growth. And it's doing the exact opposite of what it should do. Like, that will always be like, that's going to be the one that sticks with me always, for sure.
Yeah. It is weird because I wouldn't say it's natural because I always feel like I'm trapped in the cabin, even though there's things like clearly they have one giant spotlight lighting the woods. So everything is very, surreal and all that. For me, the scene that I always think is the coolest and it always catches me by surprise, I always forget it's coming, is at the end, right? So the zombies have been nullified. Ash has thrown the Necronomicon into the fire. I love the scene where the Necronomicon licks its lips, and we see the lady zombie do it too. And you're like, oh, fuck, the book was the puppet master, not the floating spirit. Kind of a cool little extra beat, right? But the moment for me are when the giant demon hands explode out of the corpses. And it's just you're like, what next level? So now it's not the book or the flying cloud. Like, we're straight in a portal to hell. And when those giant hands erupt out and are just like looking for anything else to pull into their hell dimension. Yeah. Every single time I see that, I'm just fucking punk rock in my living room. I love it.
Yeah. We'll get to I'll say this, when we do, tomorrow when we do Evil Dead 2, I'll get to my all-time favorite Evil Dead gag, which is just like, it's so nonsensical, but it is my all-time favorite gag. 100%.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think also I must say I was super into the use of claymation. Because that's another one of those where you're like, it's an argument I have with myself. Because you're like, it hasn't aged well, but I love it, so it has aged well, right? That's like one of those weird...
I mean...
I feel like if that's too slick, right? Like if it's too CG'd and this and that, I don't know. I kind of dig it.
To me, claymation's one of those things where it's the forefather of the era we're in now. Like, again, they almost did claymation on Jurassic Park. So, like, you have no... Before, I mean, it was literally like Harryhausen and then nothing. Like, before we had computers, this is what we did. So there's nothing about it that to me feels... I mean, aged well is hard to say because, like, it was the only thing that they had for decades.
Also, like it's so ingrained in my heart. Like, maybe it's not aged well, but I still love it. I would love to hear, like, let's say a 16-year-old kid is watching it in the garage and they see that claymation right now today, having lived in the streaming era and everything is so slick and computer animated. Do they go, what the fuck? Or are they like us? They're like, yes.
Well, like, I think of the litmus test for me for young people liking claymation is RoboCop, because the very end, that's so not the guy that gets thrown out of the window.
Turns into Slender Man.
The longest arms ever, and you're like, that's clearly not him. Like, that to me is the litmus test. And there's people who still find RoboCop and love it. Like,
I don't think it's about even claymation.
It's not necessarily that it hasn't aged well. It's that it's wonderfully nostalgic. That's what it is.
I think maybe what I'm trying to say is that it's one of those, again, it's another thing, because I think this movie became so iconic, and so imitated that I think this is another of those examples. They had to have had other ways to do that, right? That would have been less painstaking. Because especially in a low-budget indie film without a lot of resource, claymation feels like an irresponsible decision almost. But this is one more chance
Does
where
seem
Sam
like a lot
Raimi
of money to use.
says, I think this is cool and I must love this for some reason. Let's do, and it's another iconic and unusual choice, especially for 1981. I'm always stunned because this feels like a movie that came out much later to me.
Well, like the other thing too that I think about when thinking about claymation, especially from the 1980s, is all of those guys grew up on Harryhausen movies. So doing that is like us watching. It's like us watching any of the movies we grew up on now. Like it's us watching like slasher movies and using those same tropes there. Like it's us loving Caro corn syrup and loving the way fake blood looks in movies like Friday the 13th and Freddy, you know? Yeah. It's the same vibe. So when you grow up on Ray Harryhausen movies, of course, the first thing you're going to think of is like, man, it'd be so cool to get some goofy claymation in here because you look at it and obviously that shit's not real. You knew it when you were a kid, but it was real enough for you. So to me, it's the same thing. Like it's almost honoring your forefathers when Sam Raimi's using claymation in this movie, it's honoring the past. It's honoring where he came from.
Yeah.
Or what came first.
Yeah.
Not from,
it's just, I think that's what I love. I love that it is because again, it's a horror movie that has a faceless villain, right? Who then just becomes all of us. And I'm not going to lie. I don't think the possessed makeup is particularly good in this film.
No.
It has no true characters of note, right? Even Ash, who we seemingly like by the end, doesn't really have much character that develops in this film.
Right.
It's just one of those, and there's not really, kids go to a cabin in the wood and play a spell that awakens an ancient evil that technically is already awakened. That's it. So the whole movie's narrative is essentially an elevator pitch.
Right. But I think
because of style and love, this series of just vignettes and this guy who's like, I know I can make this a memorable, iconic moment, right? This is that Robert McKee story thing, right? They won't remember what the character's motivation was in Act 3 because of that thing on page 7. Everyone's going to remember those couple big movie moments. And to achieve those, you have to lay some groundwork, but that's what they remember. And I feel like Sam Raimi just is like, I'm doing a greatest hits album, right? And this is just going to be all shit that I know I can make cool.
It
works.
Raimi,
it absolutely works, and I feel like it should.
Sam Raimi doing everything that he knows he can do to make a fucking badass movie, and that's what The Evil Dead is. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly what it is. It's a greatest hits album of everything Sam Raimi at that point had learned to do in filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I think that's why and obviously this is his first movie. Like Sam Raimi continued to be a great filmmaker. We've talked about more than one Sam Raimi movie on this podcast. And I think moving forward, that's the kind of stuff, that's the kind of thing you want from people, and particularly people who are making horror movies, is that level of inventiveness, but also that level of dedication to saying like, listen, I know it's at my disposal. I'm using it all, and it's all going to be awesome. I love that. And that's why I love The Evil Dead.
Well, especially in horror movies, I feel like we get so many, and I'm sure this is not like a horror movie genre exclusive, but I feel like we get so many movies where it's just like, here's a monster, here's some beautiful teenagers, have them go at, and you just watch it, and it's just this, it's a horror exercise, and you can tell that there's no real love for it. It's just like, we're making a horror movie because these sell. And when you see these ones that come through and they just, again, it reminds me of, when you watch Suspiria or Black Swan or this and that. There are movies I watch that I describe it's almost as if there's electricity in the air when I watch them, right? There's this extra aura, that comes from this perfect alchemy of really caring and wild inventiveness. And it makes it, 'cause again, no money, no recognizable actors, first timers. little to no script, I'm assuming, and they just, it all works. Like, this was a recipe for disaster, and it becomes one of the great success stories for independent filmmakers. And you and love film, go out and do your version of that. And this has become an empire, Evil Dead. This little movie in 1981 could have been just another in the deluge of movies that were lost and now are kind of coming back in the streaming era. This could have been one of those so fucking easy, but it just has these extra bits of magic that make it stand out, and it was almost ahead of the curve for so many of its contemporaries.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the prime example, I think, of making a meal out of a morsel. Like, there's absolutely no better way for me to describe it than Sam Raimi saying, I have an idea, and going out and shooting the idea. Yeah. Like, whatever the script was, great. But this movie becomes so much more than a script so quickly, and that's what makes The Evil Dead memorable.
That's it, guys, for The Evil Dead. Not really. We have 3 more adventures. Alex has 2 because he don't like gory, bloody stuff. And the Evil Dead remake is one of the most horrifying examples of carnage ever. So we're going to spare Alex that. But tomorrow, we're going to find out what happens when the little filmmaker that could gets invited to the club, right? Gets that money, gets that budget, and kind of remakes the movie. But also not exactly. We'll get to that tomorrow. So tomorrow, Evil Dead 2, I would say probably one of the greatest horror films ever made. Thank you so much, guys, for spending all this time with us. Thank you. It means the world to us. Please share us on your socials so more people can join. Get that big push here before the end of the month. Please take a second and leave us a rating and review. That means the world to us. Thank you to those who have. Especially on Apple Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, 5-star rating and review. Email us, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, with your movie selections for December Stuff Your Stocking month. And get at us on all your socials, guys. We love to hear from you. We'll see you tomorrow for Evil Dead 2. Yeah, 2. I almost...